Popular history often paints 19th century immigrants as a uniform class of subsistence farmers, men and women arriving with no past and no status. But genealogical research conducted by Roger Alvarez III into a specific Midwestern line reveals a much older starting point. He traced the family's records back through the centuries to uncover a direct link to a medieval ruling elite. This territory in Northern Ireland was the Kingdom of Oriel. For centuries, it was governed by the McMahon, the Sons of the Bear. They controlled the land through fortified ring forts, managing wealth and enforcing Gaelic law across Monaghan and Armagh. Understanding this royal baseline changes the context of their arrival in America. Their migration wasn't an attempt to find a fortune. It was a move to protect a targeted dynasty from total erasure. In the mid-1600s, the English parliamentarian forces under Oliver Cromwell invaded Ireland, bringing a massive shift in how land was owned and managed. The English administration systematically dismantled the Gaelic power structure. They executed McMahon leaders, including the Bishop of Clogher, and confiscated the family's ancestral lands to redistribute them to loyalist soldiers and settlers. Almost instantly, the ruling class was pushed to the bottom of the social order. The McMahons were reduced to tenant farmers, working the exact same acreage their ancestors had ruled, but now paying rent to foreign landlords. By the early 1800s, the family faced a permanent future of poverty and religious marginalization. Leaving Ulster was no longer a choice of preference. It was the only way to move the bloodline out from the control of landlords. When the McMahons reached New York City in the 1830s, they expected a sanctuary. Instead, they stepped off the boats into a city that was increasingly hostile to their very presence. They were met by the rise of the Know-Nothings, a secretive political organization built on the belief that Irish Catholics were culturally inferior and politically dangerous. The movement used job discrimination to keep the Irish in low-paying day labor, while nativist mobs frequently sparked riots in immigrant neighborhoods. This created a physical trap. The cost of living in the dense wards near the Manhattan docks consumed every cent the family earned. Because they couldn't find steady wages, they couldn't save the few dollars needed for passage westward, keeping them stuck in the urban slums they were trying to escape. New York had become a new version of the oppression they fled. To survive, they would have to find a way out of the city and deep into the interior. The Erie Canal offered the first affordable way out. It functioned as an industrial highway, allowing thousands of migrants to bypass the expensive and dangerous overland routes. This photo shows the massive stone locks at Lockport. This was the infrastructure the McMahons navigated, moving by canal boat through Rochester and Buffalo at the speed of a walking horse. But instead of stopping in the American West, they crossed the border into Ontario, Canada. Canada offered what New York couldn't: cheap, rural farmland and a familiar British legal system that, while flawed, lacked the intense, organized violence of the American nativist parties. It was a safer environment to raise a family and build an agricultural base. By using the canal to reach Ontario, the families stopped being passive victims of urban poverty. They used the geography of the Great Lakes to place themselves in a more favorable political and economic landscape. By the late 1800s, a new economic magnet pulled the family back south. The lumber boom in Michigan was creating thousands of high-paying, albeit dangerous jobs. The work was grueling. During the deep winter, crews lived in isolated Gladwin County logging camps like this one, working in sub-zero temperatures to fell and transport massive white pines. The McMahons took up these heavy crosscut saws, clearing the timber by hand. It was a complete shift from their royal origins. They were now frontier laborers, trading physical health for a steady wage. That labor allowed the family to finally save enough to buy land in Michigan. After 200 years as tenants in Ireland and Canada, they had worked the logging camps to regain their status as independent landowners. Also working in those same Gladwin County logging camps were the Cawfells, a family that had recently arrived from England. The Cawfells were working-class Protestants, typical of the demographic shift in northern England as the Industrial Revolution pushed families toward the colonies. Historically, these two families should have been at odds. The Cawfells represented the exact religious and political system that had stripped the McMahons of their kingdom and titles back in the 1600s. But in the Michigan Pines, the man on the other end of the crosscut saw mattered more than his prayer book. Shared winters and the common goal of land ownership eroded the old sectarian lines, eventually leading to the marriage of James Arthur McMahon and Juanita Caufel. This union was the final step of the migration. By joining with the very demographic that once displaced them, the family moved past the old world grievances to establish a new, unified identity.